Welcome to Sabs podcast. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I am very excited about my special guest today. Her name is Clare Daly. She is a member of the European Parliament, and she is also a member of Independence for Change, which is part of the left in the European Parliament. Clare, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks very much for having me, Sabrina. Pleasure is all mine.
So recently, Germany, and this really kind of hurt my heart because I grew up in Germany. Germany just announced that they are going to send Leopard tanks to Ukraine. So I was disappointed to hear this. But recently, one of the members of the German parliament, Slevin, she actually answered this question on Democracy Now! About whether or not she believes this is a good idea. So I just want to play this really quick.
This decision, sending battle tanks to Ukraine from Germany and giving the decision that Poland and others can send Leopard 2 German tanks to Ukraine is a historic wrong decision. And it comes only because of the pressure, the heavy pressure of the United States Biden administration, we have to say. Several months ago, Chancellor Scholz in the German parliament, in the Foreign Affairs Committee, said it is a red line. It's a line of escalation, sending battle tanks from Germany to Ukraine. That would cross a red line. But the pressure now was too heavy, too strong from the Biden administration to send Germany in the front line of this war. And it was the pressure of the coalition partners, the Greens and the Liberals. They are actually the neocons in this coalition in Germany. They officially said that they would breach the coalition if these battle tanks, Leopard 2, wouldn't be sent by Chancellor Scholz to Ukraine. And that was the problem. And we are now in a very bad situation because I think it's a wrong decision, historic wrong decision, because it's against the majority of the population in Germany. According to new polls in the recent days, the majority in Germany is against sending battle tanks to Ukraine. The majority is in favor for more diplomacy, for a negotiated peace in Ukraine. The other thing is the 31st of January will be the anniversary, the 80th anniversary of the battle in Stalingrad. And every family in Russia lost loved ones in this battle in Stalingrad. And you do not have to be a prophet to know that sending German tanks against Russia in this proxy war of the United States will have a way more mobilization in the Russian society in this war. So that means you have the opposite impact, what you want actually within Russia towards this war. And this is why it is historically so wrong to send battle tanks.
So, Clare, I wanted to get your take on that. How do you feel about Germany sending Leopard tanks to Ukraine?
Yeah, I mean, she's so right on so many counts. And I suppose the first things I would say about her is that we've been struck here in the European Parliament by the actual warmongering of the Green Party in Germany. She's totally right. They are the neocons in terms of foreign policy here in the EU, which is quite shocking for people who would think that they are liberal and sort of involved in social change. But they have been one of the key drivers as well. Look, everything she said is totally true. This is a line now that has been crossed. I'm hoping, and I think there are some signs that it might be a step too far. It may be the straw that broke the camel's back, because a majority of people across Europe are in favour for peace, but they've been afraid to articulate it. But on the back of Germany capitulating now and agreeing to take that historic step, setback, whatever, now we see calls coming out of Germany for an alliance of the anti-war movement, for a call for a more diplomatic solution, for a cessation of hostilities, for the refusal to turn. And I think it may finally wake people up that they have to take action on this, that sitting at home and not protesting and putting their government under pressure is a luxury that they can't afford anymore. I mean, it's truly shocking. 27 million Soviet people lost their lives in the war. We had today International Holocaust Day, where we were in the chamber commemorating the millions who lost their lives to the Nazis, but actually there's been a rewriting of history now, where they're trying to write out the role played by the Red Army in defeating Nazism in Germany. And the fact that we've had decades of sort of reduced militarism from Germany because of that wound and that guilt, I suppose, and that now they're back into active engagement in military aggression. And it is coming from what was, and Biden was on the record of it, and I mean, Hillary Clinton said before that the war in Ukraine, she gleefully said when Russia crossed around, that this could be Russia's Afghanistan, like, you know. And when you look at the horror that Afghanistan is in now, and you look at the disruption and the destruction in Ukraine, you kind of say, well, yeah, she's got her wish, but my God, at what cost? Like, does she want to fight Russia? It's ordinary people who are paying for that. So I think a red line has been crossed in Europe on this. I think the Baltic states have been driving, and Poland have been driving, a very aggressive anti-Russian, pro-NATO stance. Germany and France, to a lesser degree, were standing against that a bit. They've caved on this issue, whether it's just, and it's obviously serious, but whether it's just a headline seriousness, like that they break that non-interventionism, but that it'll be a token one, or whether it'll open the floodgates, I'm not sure. The numbers that's been spoken about now of the heavy vehicles and tanks being sent, the numbers are relatively small. But the problem is that once you make the first step and the first betrayal, well, then all the other betrayals become a little bit easier. But I suppose we don't really know. There are worrying indications of some people saying, well, up to this now, we've been arming Ukraine to help them survive, but now we're arming them to win, which is just utterly ludicrous. And I mean, in fairness, there will be some across the US establishment saying that, but ironically, it's some of the former military personnel or active military personnel in the US services who are being the most rational about this conflict and the most realistic. And I think you have some political war hawks here just playing along with NATO propaganda. They don't know what they're messing with, but it's ordinary people's lives that are at the butt of it. It is worrying, but very worrying.
Do you feel we're on the brink of a nuclear war? And Brent asked here, what do you believe will be the aftermath of this situation for the world?
I don't know if we're on I don't dismiss it lightly. You know, this idea, sure, look, there's no way the Russians will ever go nuclear. I mean, that's very, very sort of, I wouldn't go there. I don't think it's the most likely thing. But in the event of a major escalation, if it was the case that Russia felt it was going to suffer serious losses, I wouldn't rule out them going there. But what's deeply worrying is behind the scenes, where a global world has been facilitated in terms of division. So you can see now in the whole area of the South China Sea, for example, is being teed up as the next area, where Taiwan has been used as a sort of a Ukraine stick in the way in which Ukraine was used to provoke Russia. Taiwan is kind of being used with China. And the people benefiting from this are the military-industrial complex. And countries in that region then are lining up with either side. So North Korea lines up with Russia. South Korea is looking, we'll get a few nuclears as well, and we'll go in, but we'll line up with the other side. And all of this is very dangerous, because military hard, like, you know, as an anti-war activist, we would have stood for disarmament and all that. When you provide arms, they have to get used, and they have to get used somewhere, and people are going to die at the end of it. And that's the story that we're getting into now. So I suppose what the short answer is, I can see the world in some ways breaking down into those camps. But actually, and my hope in the situation, because I'm always hopeful, is that actually the future of humanity rests outside the blocks that we normally talk about. So here in Europe, we get, you know, talked about, you know, what happens in the US, maybe Canada, maybe Australia. So the big white former colonial powers in a European context, it's their new colonialism now. But actually, the majority of the world's population doesn't live in the US and Europe. It lives in the global south. It lives in India and Pakistan, all across Africa. They've the Middle East, they've an incredibly well-educated young population, which Europe doesn't have, and it's getting older and older, and it needs those young people. And the resilience and the fact that the world is smaller now because of social media. That actually my hope is that it's those people in the global south who are going to shape the destination, because it's no accident that it's the countries which contain the majority of the world's populations have voted at UN level and all of that not to go along with the US agenda on this. It's not that they support the war or anything, but they're not going to be used as a puppet in this. They support peace, and 77 of the countries supported peace. So that's where we get the hope from. And again, we find it a bit mad that when we go to places, I had the honor of going to Pakistan before Christmas, and we met people there in the airport who kind of said, oh, I love you guys, you're great. Like, my God, like, you know, it just shows how small the world has got, like that we're from little Ireland and people get to hear stuff like that. So yeah, I think the global south is where the future of humanity lies, if you like. It's in the old days, we had the Cold War, but there was a big non-aligned movement as well, a kind of a third way that stayed out of the US and USSR on both sides. You had all of those countries. I think it's a time for a new non-aligned movement, and probably the biggest components of it are actually the ordinary citizens in Europe and in the US who are so disconnected from their political establishment that sadly, you know, nobody in power in Europe or in the US really represents the people on the ground. But the people haven't found a way to empower themselves yet or take hold of that system. And it's very difficult. And I really feel sorry for the US that you have this two-party system that we had in some ways as well, that people think the Democrats were given the charge of, you know, granting salvation to working people. My God, like, I think that illusion is long gone. But it's a little bit like the British Labour Party. It's what was there to build an alternative. It's difficult, but to go back to where we started, like the unions in Britain, out of the struggle around the rail workers' strike, and the fact that the Labour Party, who'd be similar to the Democratic Party, actually in the rail strikes in Britain, by and large, didn't support them either. So the solution of the unions was, well, we're going to stand our own candidates and we're going to take that on. We had something similar like that in Ireland, where we had a campaign of the trade unions to save our water supply, and we had great support at that time from the Detroit people who were fighting to save their water. They used to come over, but some people in the parliament in Ireland, the trade unions in Ireland, or a lot of them, not all of them, the more militant ones, actually most of them probably not, but enough of them to be important, and people in the communities came together to defend our water system, a bit like the Enough is Enough campaign. And I think, you know, people who have a political platform should use it, but they should use it as a vehicle to organize others, because the people in power don't change things. It's ordinary people who change things, and they force the political establishment in a direction. So we should be using our platform to encourage people to do that. And I think people would be willing if a way is pointed before them, and there is a responsibility on the unions in that as well. A lot of the unions in our neck of the woods aren't great either, and people have had to find new ways and new unions, and have had to take existing unions out of the official structures, because the official structures became too much part of the establishment and gagged and bound them. And that's a bit of the problem. You know, you ask, why could we speak? I suppose, you know, I can speak because I'm answerable to nobody except the people who vote for me. And I said, look, I'm going to say what I think. Will I make mistakes? Yeah, of course I will. But you look at, you know, everybody makes mistakes. There's no problem with that. The only problem is if you don't learn from them, or if you try and cover up from them. And unfortunately, I think political parties too often play games. They're just involved in the headlines and position themselves in the media. I generally ignore the media, which is just as well, given the amount of criticism that we're getting for our stance on the war. If I listen to the media, I wouldn't get out of bed in the morning, to be honest with you. And unfortunately, I think a lot of people in politics just live their lives by what the media say. That's not real life at all. And they've lost the hearts and minds of the people they should be representing, you know.